Chapter 89. This venerable one's past affair with you. When Moran awoke, it was already bright and the sun was high in the sky. He rolled over and blinked. To his surprise, Chu Wanning was still fast asleep. Perhaps it was the effect of the tapir fragrance too, or perhaps it was because of his poor health as of late, along with bouts of fitful sleep troubled by dreams, that he was still in slumber even at this hour. His back was turned to Moran, and long, inky hair spilled loose across pillow and bed, its strands the color of the night. Moran eyed him. If the teacher hadn't yet risen, there was no reason for the student to be particularly industrious. The bed was too comfortable. He might as well stay in it a little longer. But just lying there was boring, so Moran scooched closer and began to play with Chu Wanning's hair. Chu Wanning's hair always smelled faintly of flowers, soft as smoke, fine as mist. It was one of Moran's favorite things to touch. He combed his fingers through those misty strands. The feel of them, smooth as satin, wrapped around his fingers, made his insides tingle. A breeze swept through the window, and the dark patterned bed curtains drifted gently in its wake. Moran narrowed his eyes. Certain parts of him were especially energetic in the morning, and with such a pleasant sensation at his fingertips, one that was so familiar, so... He lifted a lock of Chu Wanning's hair to his nose and inhaled. Those long, soft strands called to mind scenes from the bygone past. Since his rebirth, Moran had tried his best not to think too much about the more salacious portions of his history with Chu Wanning. But for some reason, this morning, he felt like indulging in reminiscence. His throat felt a little dry. He didn't want to touch Chu Wanning's body anymore, but his hair should be fine. Moran closed his eyes and pressed his lips lightly into the inky darkness between his fingers. This inky darkness. Back then, at Xisheng Peak's Wushan Palace, the same inky darkness had fallen around Moran like a curtain. He had held that man's slender waist in his hands, the feeling of lean muscle beneath his fingers, so different from that of a woman. Chu Wanning straddled Moran's hips and worked himself up and down. It must have hurt. His sharp brows were drawn tightly together, and motes of light glistened in those phoenix eyes, tinged a vivid red by ferocity and despair. He was so resentful, so unwilling, yet so helplessly pitiful. Exulting in his victory, Moran made his demands, his voice steady, yet not without malice. Faster. No reply. Are you tired already? You're moving so slowly. But even like this, Chu Wanning's ironclad will was firm, and he refused to yield. He exhaled, hatred plain in his teary, red-rimmed eyes. Then he bit down on his lip and began to move, fast and rough, almost as if punishing himself. It was agony. He did it again and again, even when his arched back began to shudder and cold sweat drenched his body. Still he didn't beg, didn't make a sound. Through the long inky locks obscuring Chu Wanning's vision, Moran's eyes were bright and the black of night, burning with animalistic desire, madness, ecstasy, gratification. A stifled groan. It seemed the man on top of him could finally withstand the pain no longer. Moran's eyes darkened, and he sat up without warning, wrapping his arms around Chu Wanning's trembling, sweat-soaked body, which, for all his desperate endurance, was still racked with the faintest shivers. The change in position only sheathed Moran deeper inside him, until he felt his stomach might be pierced through. That cruel, ruthless person caressed him, his touch tender, yet laced with venom. Chu Wanning, did you ever think you'd end up like this? Sitting in my lap, taking my cock. Moran held him tightly, fucking slowly in and out. He nuzzled Chu Wanning intimately, and a shudder ran through him. You hang off the night sky, Baidu immortal. In the end, you still had to spread your legs and beg me to fuck you. His hands wandered along Chu Wanning's waist, and he thrust in deep, reveling in the feeling of Chu Wanning clenching tight around his cock. Moran was intoxicated. There were practically fireworks going off in his chest, but he put up a front of calm indifference as he tormented and humiliated the man astride him. Didn't you call me lowly? Didn't you look down on me? But Chu Wanning, now it's you who seeks my favor. He sank his teeth viciously into Chu Wanning's jaw. Look down. Look at how you're sucking me in. Between the two of us, who's the more lowly here, my dear shizun? Silent, shivering, Chu Wanning closed his eyes. He didn't want to hear such filthy words. It was his first time. It was with the person he had once liked, yet it was torture worse than death. Open your eyes, came the callous order by his ear. I still have Chu. You know what I'll do if you disobey. He had no choice. Slowly, he opened eyes brimming with tears he refused to let fall. The hand on his jaw forced him to look down at the sight of himself taking his disciple's cock. The sound of flesh against flesh, the stickiness of blood mixed with thick fluid, all of it was unbearably wanton. Up a little. There was no strength in his legs, but he didn't want Moran's help. The last tattered piece of his dignity lifted his body by force of will alone. The hardness inside him slid out until only the engorged head was pressed to his entrance. Moran wrapped his hand around his own length and thrust in shallowly a few times, just enough for Chu Wanning to see himself breached. Chu Wanning's lashes quivered, from pain or humiliation or arousal. You're such a slut. Moran breathed. If I'd known sooner, I would have fucked you back when I was your disciple. He was an uncultured scoundrel after all, with no manners or elegance to speak of. Those vulgar words slipped into Chu Wanning's heart like a blade. He lifted his head, closed his eyes, and spoke for the first time that night in a voice raspy and raw. Moran, just kill me. The hand on his waist twitched imperceptibly. Then Moran smiled, sweet as ever, the bow of his mouth framed by a pair of charming dimples. Okay. Chu Wanning's eyes flew open. In those tear-filled eyes that made his blood boil with arousal, Moran saw the reflection of his own twisted smile. If you want to die, I won't stop you. But you don't get to choose how. I'll let 1,000 people fuck you while your good little disciple Chu Wanning looks on. Actually, Chu Wanning should join in too. How about that? You... His cruel words stung Chu Wanning like venom, and, like the scorpion, Moran watched his work with glee, watched the blood drain from Chu Wanning's face, his slightly parted lips trembling despite his restraint. Moran suddenly felt a deep sense of satisfaction, colored with pity, but also with delight and arousal. He pulled Chu Wanning back into his arms and buried his cock deep inside, thrusting relentlessly into him at a pace unforgiving, almost frenzied. Ha! You're so gullible. You actually believe that? He let out a deep laugh and kissed Chu Wanning ravenously, his hands kneading and stroking him as he said between heavy breaths, Don't think too hard. I was just messing with you. Chu Wanning seemed about to fall to pieces with every thrust. More than that, it was as if his soul itself had shattered. Just messing with you. Moran's breath came in harsh pants. It wasn't enough. He pushed Chu Wanning to the floor and leaned over him, bearing down heavily, and lifted Chu Wanning's legs to thrust deeper as he snapped his hips with abandon. How could I bear to let anyone else touch you like that? You're mine. Only I get to. Pale, slender fingers scrabbled against the ground, but found no purchase. In the end, Chu Wanning was powerless. He could only let Moran do as he pleased, until his consciousness began to fade and the light in his eyes grew dim. Chu Wanning suddenly lifted his arm and covered his eyes. "Moran," he said softly. "Moran, if you still have any compassion in you, any conscience." His lashes shuddered against the back of his hand. "Please, don't do this anymore, Moran." His voice broke on a sob. It was the first time in Moran's life that he saw Chu Wanning cry. "Moran, I can't take it anymore. It hurts." Chu Wanning rolled over, jolting Moran out of his debauched reverie. The past dissipated like a scattering of birds, leaving only his heart to pound against his ribcage. The long strands between his fingers slipped away as the person from his memories turned toward him, his face so close now that Moran could see each individual eyelash. How beautiful, he thought. Objectively speaking, Chu Wanning's looks weren't gentle or soft by any measure. His features were handsome, sharp and intense, as if cut by blades, and in truth more masculine than average. But that only made him all the more enticing. Moran wanted to see this proud, unbending man come undone beneath him. His heart beat faster and faster. He stared at Chu Wanning's face, and his gaze drifted inch by inch until it came to rest on those pale lips, lightly parted in sleep. He leaned in unconsciously, a little closer, and their lips would meet. The sweet taste of dew. Moran's throat worked as he swallowed. His mouth felt dry. A little closer, just a little more, almost. Suddenly, a flash of clarity shot through his arousal-addled mind. He froze, face deathly pale. What was he doing? Moran sat up swiftly and stared at the man on the bed. Chu Wanning, Chu Wanning. No matter how many times he'd batted him, that was all in the past now. The fuck was he doing? Had he lost his mind? Was it possible he really did like him? Moran blanched further at the thought, so unsettled he couldn't think straight. He drew in a deep breath and buried his face in his hands, scrubbing it roughly. Then, cursing under his breath, he pulled on his outer robe and swept out of the room as if running away.